I started working many, many, many years ago. It's close to 40 now, I guess, up with the state. And I had a boss named Jim, and when I went into work, the very first couple of days, they had a software package I knew nothing about. He told me it runs 24 hours a day on a system, that it was used for Childline and for what you now call LIHEAP and many other products up with the state, with the Department of Public Welfare, and it had to be up and running. And he told me the job required that I would be on a call list 24 hours a day. I could be called any time of the day. And I said, fine. So when I started working there, they didn't have what you call word processing right now. You know, they didn't have Outlook or they didn't have documents on the PCs. In fact, they didn't even have PCs when I started working. That's how long it was. They still had punch cards. Maybe some of you remember them.
And you're still in your 20s?
Well, the years have gone slowly for me. But anyways, so I carried around a notebook everywhere I went. Anytime there was a question on how to do something or anything like that, and my boss would answer the question, I would write down in that notebook how you did it. So by the time it got done after a month or two, I had a pretty thick notebook. And one day the boss came to me and he said, okay, you've been here a couple of months. It's time for you to be on the call list. Now, you know how I felt about that. Probably. I was nervous. My boss said to me, don't worry. If you get a call and you don't know the answer, you call me. I'll tell you the answer. Then you call the operator and tell them the answer. So they'll think the answer came from you. And therefore, they'll trust you more because they'll say, Walt knows what he's doing. So, there were a couple of times there where I had written all this stuff down and they called and they had that problem and I was able to answer the question without a problem and took care of it. But there were some times when it was a unique problem that I hadn't encountered yet. And certainly, my boss made the mistake of telling me I could call him. So I did. And thankfully, my boss was not upset. In fact, he was rather overjoyed that I did because he'd rather have me call in the middle of the night and find out what the right answer was than give them the wrong answer and come in the next morning and everything was a mess. So he'd give me the answer, and I'd turn around and call the operator, and it was all good. So that made me look pretty smart to the operators. My boss was happy with me. My wife, not necessarily, because in the middle of the night, she's laying there, and all of a sudden the phone's ringing. Now, over the many years that time came by and stuff, I came to know all of these things and how to fix things and everything else and stuff there. And before you could get online and fix problems from home and everything else, there were a good many times I'd have to get up, jump in the car, drive up to work, get on a terminal up there, fix a problem that took about 5 minutes to fix, turn around and drive all the way home, and it was a half hour to work and back. So, all in all, I learned a good bit. My boss learned to count on me and has learned that during the times when there were problems or things like that in the middle of the night, he could sleep through and he didn't have to worry about anything being bad when he got in the morning. Now, my coworker, a female at the time, she was a nice lady, decided, she had been working there for a year or two before me, that since I was the new guy, she would do her best to make sure I got trained properly. So what she told me she was going to do one day after I'd been on the call list for a month is she was answering no calls on her phone after about 10 o'clock at night. So therefore, if they called her on the call list and she was above me on the call list, guess who was getting called? Now, you say to yourself, well, what's that got to do with today's lesson? Well, today's lesson is entitled, Be Strong and Courageous. Now, when I got those calls in the beginning, I could have sat there and been as scared and afraid and not knowing what I was doing and everything else, and I could have said, I can't do this. Or I could trust in what my boss had taught me and what I had learned over those 2 months and begin to work and answer these questions and rely on my boss, and I was able to succeed. Now, many times in our life, we have problems, don't we? Do you ever get overwhelmed by your problems? Do you ever get to the point where you just say, I can't do this? And you're right, you can't. But God can. And we can call on Him and rely on Him to be able to take care of our problems in our times of need, right? And He gives us the strength to be able to do it. Paul said, when I am weak, then I am strong. And how can that be? How can you be strong and weak at the same time? Well, if you're thinking about it, when you are physically weak, humanly weak, it is at that point you turn to who? To God. And God gives you the strength to be able to go through whatever experiences that you are having in your life. And He strengthens you. Now, this morning's lesson is about the people of Israel. And back in Moses' time, we start out. Now, you know Moses. Moses was the guy who was thrown into the put in the bulrushes when he was a baby and grew up in the Pharaoh's palace. And then one time he was kicked out of the kingdom because he killed a guy that was beating a Hebrew, and he's out there living for 40 years. And one day he saw that bush up on the mountain, and it was burning, but it wasn't burning, right? And when he went up to see what was going on up there, God told him to take off his shoes because it was holy ground. But there was a reason God called him, wasn't there? What was his mission? Anybody know? What was his mission? To do what? To lead the people of Israel out of slavery. And Moses right away jumped out and said, I can do that, right? No. He had big questions. Well, I'm not a big speaker. How am I going to be able to accomplish this? What if the people don't like me and don't believe me down there? Who am I going to say sent me? He had all kinds of questions. He didn't feel he was up to the task, that he was the right man for the job. But God said, yes, you are. He said when he asked about who's going to speak, he said, I'll give you Aaron. He said, who should I tell him sent me? You say, I am that I am. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was sending him down there. Well, when he went down there to the Pharaoh, what happened? It all went smooth. He walked into the Pharaoh and he said, God says, let my people go. And the Pharaoh said, sure. Anything you need to take them out. No. In fact, the Pharaoh, he kind of laughed at him. And all of these different plagues and things like that, the Pharaoh still didn't take him out. In fact, the people, the first plague there and stuff, with the snakes, when he had the snake there and his staff ate the other snakes, what did Pharaoh say? Yeah, a magician can do it. And in fact, what he told him is, well, if your God is so great, let them make bricks without what? Without straw. Oh, yes. This was an easy job for Moses, wasn't it? Moses got down there and he has this job and he's been given this task. And Moses is the leader. How do you think he was feeling as he was down there and all these things were going wrong? How do you think Moses might have felt? Well, this is like Mission Impossible. I'm down here trying to get these people free. God sent me, and every time I go in to see the Pharaoh, it just gets worse. Now, alongside of Moses down there was a young man, very young. And he was watching all these things going on. And you might say that he was an assistant helping Moses. And you know what his name? His name was Joshua. And he's growing up and he's watching all these events taking place. Moses finally gets the people free. Pharaoh says they can go when the death angel comes. Go, get out, faster, the best you can. All's great. Task is done, right? No. Moses leads him to the Red Sea. Pharaoh decides what? I'm coming after him. I want him back. If I ain't got my slaves, I can't build. I need all these people. I want them back. They're up against the Red Sea. Moses just got the people all freed from Egypt. And the people were all happy, weren't they? Nope. They get out to the Red Sea, and they're standing against the Red Sea, and the Red Sea's sitting there, and their backs are against it, and Pharaoh's army's coming. And what do the people say? Did you bring us out here to die? We were better off back in Egypt. What does God do? Parts the Red Sea. The people go across on dry ground, the Bible tells us. When Pharaoh's army goes to chase after them, the waters collapse on top of them and they're all drowned. Well, certainly all the people believed then, didn't they? Yeah, they might have for a little bit. But how long does faith last? Till the next event comes up. In many cases. And you forget what God has done for you before very quickly. People get out there and they're going and they're traveling and towards Canaan, towards the promised land. And we got no food. We got no water. We got no this. We got no that. And every time they'd go to Moses. How would you like to be a guy in charge of well over 1 million people? One man. Well over 1 million people, leading them towards the promised land. And all these people would come out there griping and groaning and complaining and everything else. You know, I raised 3 sons along with my wife. There were times they weren't happy with me. You ever raise children? They're not always happy, are they? No. Sometimes they come griping and complaining, don't they? And sometimes you're just sitting there going, ah! I tease the boys, that's why I'm bald-headed. Sure. Now, I don't know if Moses had hair or not. But he was leading all these people out of Egypt. And as they get out of Egypt and everything else, and as they're going through this, and they'd keep complaining, God would keep providing. He sent manna. He sent quail. He would provide water. Everything they needed. Every time. And you'd say to yourself, well, since he's done this so often, obviously their faith must be growing. And they can start looking to God and believing that he was their Lord and Savior. He was their God. Moses goes up on the mountain along with Joshua. Joshua, one of the young men, they walk up there, and Joshua's down below, and then Moses is up top, and God's given them the 10 Commandments. And what are the people down below in the valley doing? Making a calf. Golden calf. worshiping idols, something else. Moses comes down from the mountain, and what does he find? He finds the people have been led astray. God punishes them. He goes up after he breaks the tablet, gets another set of tablets, come back down, tells the people the 10 Commandments and the rules and everything else. And you'd certainly think that by now everybody got the message. They finally get to the promised land. People say, well, we've heard lots of stories about that land. They say it's flowing with milk and honey. It's land where you can grow anything. It's got everything you need. It's a prosperous land. But we've also heard that there are giants living in that land. Other people living in that land. And God told them, he told Moses to tell them, I'll take care of that problem. Don't worry about it. They want to send in spies. They send in spies from 12 tribes. One man from each tribe. Joshua and Caleb go in along with 10 other men. What's the story? After they've been in there, I think it was 40 days, they come back out. And 10 men look at them and say, you can't go in there. Yes, it's flowing with milk and honey. Yes, the land is prosperous. Yes, it's just like this. But have you seen the people living in there? Now, I don't know how big the Israelites were, but they're saying that the men living in there were, the one tribe, were giants. Huge. Now, the other day I was watching a football game on TV, a high school football game. They had it, and they had this one guy playing offensive line, and they said that up until that year, the boy had been playing soccer. And I'm thinking to myself, soccer? But the coach saw him and thought he'd make a great offensive lineman. He was a goalie in the soccer team. He was 6'7", 300 pounds. In high school. And I said, he was playing goalie. He must have blocked it out by himself. I'll bet the football team coach was jumping up and down as soon as he got a load of that guy sitting on the soccer team saying, you got to come play for me. They said a college coach walked into the practice to see another boy, and he saw that guy playing offensive line, practicing for the first time, and he said, you will be a Division I offensive lineman. And the kid hadn't even played the game yet. Just that big. Have you ever been scared when somebody huge, you see somebody huge and you start to tremble a little bit? They were scared. Caleb and Joshua come back and they're holding on to this fruit that they got and everything else, and they're saying, look how great it is over there. Let's go. Only there's a problem. 10 said no, 10 said no, 2 said go. Who won? The 10 won. People of Israel once again are standing there at Moses' feet, and they said, look. They start crying. In Numbers chapter 14, he said, that night all the people of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Whole assembly, and said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and the children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to be back in Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. How quickly we forget. They wanted to go back. They were scared. They were afraid. They'd forgotten everything God had done for them in the past and what he was willing to do for them in the future. Now the question for this morning is, as we have our lesson, as we're about to look into it, the question is, have we forgotten what God has done for us in the past? Has our faith been strengthened to the point, and are we now courageous as we look to the future, realizing we can put our lives in God's hands to take care of any problem that may come up, whatever it might be? I always marvel and I always say, people ask for prayer. There's a reason you ask for prayer. Because you believe that God can provide. If you didn't believe, you wouldn't ask, right? What turns out and what happens with the people of Israel is God says to Moses, you know, I think I might just wipe them all out. I think I might destroy them all. And Moses pleads with him not to do that. And then what happens is God says that any man, any grown man that was with them when they came out of Egypt, because of their lack of faith, wasn't going to get into the promised land. Any man over the age of 40. It's a good thing, once again, that I'm not 29 yet. Anyone over the age of 40, when they came out, those 20 and younger, they're getting in. So they wandered around in the desert for 40 years until every man died. And they finally got to the point where they were ready to enter the promised land. Now, can anybody tell me what happened to Moses and Aaron? They didn't get in. Moses died, yes. Why was he sentenced to death? Why was he told, you will not get into the promised land? What did he do? He struck a rock. Instead of speaking to the rock as he was told to, because God said this would show the people that he was the one that was performing this miracle, Moses, in his anger, struck the rock with his staff. And God said, because you struck the rock with your staff, you will not get into the promised land. Aaron neither. Both of them passed away. And it says here, now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land that I did give to them, even to the children of Israel. When was this land first promised to the people of Israel? When do we find in the Bible the first mention of Canaan, of this promised land, being given to the that would be for the people of Israel? In fact, at the time it was mentioned that this land would be for the people of Israel, there was no Israel. Abraham, that's exactly right. Abraham, it was promised to Abraham that his descendants, that this land would be for his descendants. And then it was promised to Isaac, and then to Jacob, and on down through. Years and years and generations had passed. And here were the people on the footsteps of entering into the promised land. Joshua was now the leader of the people of Israel. When Moses was dying, Moses had talked to Joshua there, and in Deuteronomy, let's see, chapter 11, I think it is, verses 22 to 25. Eleven 22 to 25. If you carefully observe all these commands I am giving you to follow, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to hold fast to him, then the Lord will drive out all these nations before you, and you will dispossess nations larger and stronger than you. Every place where you set your foot will be yours. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the Euphrates to the western sea. No man will be able to stand against you. Now that sounds exactly like what was read in our text this morning. The Lord your God, as he promised you, will put the terror and fear of you on the whole land wherever you go. Joshua's getting ready to enter. God is speaking. He told Moses that before the people of Israel ever had the run-in. He's told Joshua that this, I will be with you wherever you go. You're not going in by yourself. I am giving you this land. This is the land I told Abraham about. It's yours. All you got to do is do what? Obey and go in and possess it. It's yours. Yes, there were people living in the land. God says, I will give you victory. You don't got to worry about that. It's yours. Unlike the first time they got there, though. It says, Moses, my servant, said, now therefore go over this Jordan now and all this people unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Can anybody tell me how they got through the river Jordan? It's another body of water. The Red Sea, we know that God parted the water, he rolled it back, and everybody went across on dry land. How did they get across the Jordan? The priests took the ark and they carried it in. And when they put their feet in the Jordan, the waters rolled back. It said the water stopped flowing downstream towards them. And they went across on dry land. So everybody gets across. They're in the promised land. They made it. But God says, I want you to send back one man from each tribe to pick out a stone out of the middle of the Jordan. And I want you to take it to the other side. And Joshua, you build a monument there with those 12 stones. And every time that your children asked how you got across the Jordan River, I want you to tell them. I want you to teach them so that they will remember what God has done for you. What was wrong with the people of Israel back on the other side of the River Jordan when Moses was in charge? They forgot. They forgot. Quickly, apparently. Every place that your sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea towards the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not be any man able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. When I was in the military, we had a guy that liked to pick on people. Good-sized fella. And he'd come down the hall, and if you were smaller than him, he tended to like to Just give you a hassle, and he could. One day I got upset because he's like, I'm 5'8" at best, 5'7" and something another at worst. And this guy would come down the hallway and he'd hit you or do whatever. And one day I got upset, and I guess I didn't think about what I was doing, and I just ran after the guy, and I grabbed him and picked him up and threw him down on the floor. The guy got up shocked. He could have beat the stuffings out of me. He was a big dude. But he was so shocked that this little guy picked him up and threw him down on the floor that he never bugged me again. And I know good and well it wasn't anything I normally could do. I was just that upset and that mad and that angry. You ever do anything in anger that you can do something that you don't normally able to do? Yep, I didn't even think about what I was doing. If I had, I would have never done it. But you know, it says here that nobody will be able to stand against this, against the people of Israel. God's given them all this. And you know, it also said there in the scriptures that I read you before that God was going to put the fear of terror in their eyes. That means you know you're going to play and what's going to happen. Now Ashton's sitting back there. Ashton plays football for the high school. Anybody ever hear of Bishop McDevitt? Yeah, you know how they get their football players? They go around to other schools and they say, you know, if you come up to Bishop McDevitt and play on the football team sometimes, you know, maybe your tuition might be free. They call that recruiting. But last year, I think when I went to see, we went to see Bishop McDevitt, the game was over by halftime, and I think they were up by about 50 points. Now, while Ashton's sitting back there in the back, he's probably thinking to himself, when the word of Bishop McDevitt coming to town in that game, maybe it puts a little terror in the eyes of the football players for Palmyra. Because when they get off the bus, you know, you see all these huge guys and fast guys and everything else getting off the bus, and then you got Palmyra. Doesn't seem real fair, does it, Bob? No. You know why that is? What that means? That means before the game has started, they've done what? They've lost. Because Bishop McDevitt is coming to town. When the people were there in the promised land and Israel was coming up and they heard about them getting the defeat in Jericho and they heard about Ai and how they won there again and how they beat other people, guess what happens? The fear of terror is put in their eyes. They're saying, Israel's coming our way. And they're beating everybody. And their God is in charge. We can't defeat them. There's no possible way. That's what happened as Joshua was leading Israel. These armies that they were going up against were larger than them. And they still won. Because God was in charge. We can have victory over all of our problems, whatever they are, if we allow God to rule and to be in charge in our lives and put these things in His hands. Let Him take control. Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 4 says, "For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you victory." Didn't we always sing victory in Jesus, my Savior forever? In verse 6, you will find a statement that says, "Be strong and of a good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto you, their fathers, to give them. 4 times in chapter 1 of Joshua, in verses 6, 7, 9, and 18, it is stated, be strong and of good courage. Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 31, as he's talking to Joshua, tells him to be strong and of good courage. You look through the Bible, you can see all kinds of examples of that. Daniel, when he's told not to pray, and he can't pray, yet he opens the window up and kneels down and prays to his God under the threat that he's going to be thrown into the lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace because they continue to worship their God. We see all kinds of evidence of that. Be strong and of good courage. Stand up. If the leader of the people of Israel doesn't believe that as they go forward God would take care of them, who will? If the political leaders of a country do not stand fast in their beliefs of God and set an example to the rest of the nation, who will? Who will? If a preacher stood up here on a Sunday morning and did not stand up in the faith of the Lord Jesus Christ and tell you to be strong and of good courage, that God will provide, who will? That was Joshua's job. Yes, I know some of the responsibilities have been divided up now, but into the tribes and things like that. But Joshua is still the ultimate leader. And what's even worse is, when he takes over, he has to look back at a previous leader who God called him the servant of the Lord. And the Bible tells us that there wasn't another prophet like him. How would you like to be the guy following in his footsteps? How are you ever going to live up to that model that he has set and the standard he has set in following God? Joshua had to put his faith in Jesus and God to take him through and to lead the people. Was it going to be easy? No. So Joshua took all that land, the hills and all the south country, and all in chapter 11, verse 16, land of Goshen, and the valley, and the plain, and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the Seine, even from the Mount Halak that goes up to Seir, even unto Belgad in the valley of Lebanon, unto Mount Hermon, and all their kings he took, and smote them, and slew men. And Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. I bet the Battle of Jericho seemed a long time ago by the time he was all said and done. When he first came into the Promised Land, Jericho was the first place he conquered. You know, they marched around the walls there. Yep. And after the first few days, maybe the people of Israel thought, maybe this isn't going to be quite so bad. But do you know how long it took for them to conquer that land? 7 years. 7 years of war. 7 years fighting against all these cities and all these places to conquer the land which God had given them. And God gave them victory after victory after victory after victory. And the cities learned that their God, that Israel's God, was the living God, the Bible tells us. That he went before them, the living God. You know, that's a big statement because of the fact that all of these other cities, they had their gods, but they were all stone and idols and things, and they couldn't do a thing. But the Bible tells us that the people of Israel were led by the living God. Isn't it good this morning as you're sitting here to think that your God is alive? The same God that helped the people of Israel is your God. The same God that provided all these miracles and did all these things for the people of Israel and as they entered into the promised land is your God, and He lives. He's not dead. He's not a piece of stone. If He was, I would guess those idols that these tribes had wore out a long, long, long time ago. But He lives. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He hasn't changed. We should be enthused and excited this morning by the fact that we know our God is a living God. We should be enthused knowing He still provides. Rick mentioned about the tomatoes this morning. Boy, that's a small thing, but you think about it. Sitting in the back of the church, Rick has tomatoes, peppers, and all kinds of peppers and everything else. He says they have a great abundance. I think Howard might have brought some in this morning. I'm not sure, but somebody did. Howard brought some in. Why did he bring some in? Howard's got a lot of them. You go out to my house, and we brought in one tray of grape tomatoes this morning, and they'll be back there too. But there are tons of them out in the garden. God has provided. This year, tomatoes have grown like, well, I don't know what, but I've never seen so many. And my wife, I planted and she harvests. So she has to fight her way through all the tomato stalks because I didn't quite get them tied up properly. And you know how tomatoes grow when you don't get them all tied up right. And she's been harvesting and harvesting. And she don't know what to do with them anymore either, and just like everybody else. But that's how God blesses. That's how God provides. And He provided for the people of Israel. You know that? And He would have done it back from when Moses was in charge, but the people wouldn't go. They didn't trust. They didn't have faith. They weren't courageous. They weren't strong. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel, save the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All other they took in battle. And at that time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains. Now you know who the Anakims were? They were the giant people that the Israelites said back when Moses was leading, we can't destroy them. They will kill us. But guess what? When they entered and they finally obeyed God and they did what He said to do, they won. From the mountains, from Hebron, from Debor, from Anab, from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel, Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There was none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod there remained. So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord said unto Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto Israel according to their divisions. God gave Abraham a promise. He gave it to Isaac, He gave it to Jacob, He gave it to the people of Israel. If you obey me, I will give you this land, the promised land. And guess what? They had it. God led them. And Joshua gave for an inheritance into Israel according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. Boy, I bet they were glad from that. Peace. But the promised land was there. A promise given by the Lord, a promise kept. When God gives you His word, you can trust and put your faith in it. that He will keep His word and all His promises. This morning's lesson is for each one of us, as I said in the beginning, and I hope I conveyed it, be strong and courageous. Don't give up. Don't quit. Put your faith and trust in God that He'll take you through whatever the circumstance might be. It might not be a battle, and it might not be a war, although sometimes it may feel internally like a war or a battle going on. But God will give you victory if you put your faith and trust in Him. Let's bow our heads for prayer this morning. Dear Lord, in this morning's hour, we're thankful for Your many blessings. We are thankful for this day You've given unto us. We are thankful, dear Lord, that we know that You lead the way in our lives. That whatever the problem in the situation might be, that if we put our faith and trust in You and obey You, dear Lord, that You are able to lead and guide us through and that we will have victory. This morning's hour, dear Lord, we ask You to bless us as we leave here. Watch and protect over us. Keep safe from harm and danger as we travel our ways this week, dear Lord, until we meet again. In Your name we pray, amen.